Oh, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. I'll probably have my first mock draft up maybe Sunday or Monday. Like I always say, I like to do it about a week after the Super Bowl, before the Combine. Then we'll do at least two or three others after the Combine. We'll do New York Giants specific mock drafts. My first one will probably be just a first round mock draft in general, and then talk about some of the possibilities that the New York Giants may explore with their 2 second-round selections. But in this video, we're going to talk about the topic of the day, at least what I would consider at least a minor topic. Xavier Mckinney came out today on Twitter and left what you may feel is a cryptic message, basically saying what we all expected all along, that he's going to look to get his money. Can't blame him. Can't blame any athlete for trying to go out there and get as much money as they possibly can. But don't expect Xavier Mckinney to give the New York Giants a hometown discount. A lot of fans will point to the fact that 2 years ago, the New York Giants did right by Xavier McKinney when he fell off his ATV, missed whatever, 3, 4, 5, whatever it was, the amount of games that he missed, and was able to come back for that playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings. And they will say that the New York Giants did right by him. At the end of the day, all is fair in love and war. Xavier McKinney and his agent are not going to take that into consideration when they look at what they may be able to get on potentially on the open market. And a lot of Giants fans are going to say you have to sign Xavier McKinney no matter what. He had a great year last year. He had an 87 PFF grade. He was top 5 at the safety position. He's only 24. He's emerging. And I get the argument. And all these things will be factors that Xavier McKinney and his quote-unquote super agent will take into account when they try to drive up the price on his market, which, of course, is what a good agent does. But we'll talk about my opinion on all of this throughout the video. First, let's start with Xavier McKinney and what he had to say. I want to be appreciated in every way for what I do and bring to the table as a player and as a leader. I've stood by myself 10 toes through the critics, the hate, etc., sacrificing what those around me didn't want to or were afraid to for those same people to make it a better situation for all of us. May not always have been beneficial for me, but it was for us. Don't let that go over your head. And I do it 10 times over again. And I think, if I'm reading between the lines, what he's at least insinuating at is last year he may have done things that did not benefit him statistically. Maybe he felt like if he was used in a different manner, it may have helped his value in this year's free agency. But overall, I think most people would say McKinney had a good year, really good year. He had 3 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. Like I said, he had an 87 PFF grade. He stayed healthy. He's 24. We all know he's a very talented player. He was drafted early second round, which is early for a safety. He was the first safety taken in that draft. And I would say he's at least lived up to that. He's missed some time due to injuries, but I wouldn't call him injury prone. It's not like you're going to have an ATV accident every year, right? So he's a guy that, for the most part, I think is showing you that he can stay healthy. He's talented, uber talented. He could do multiple things at the safety position, and he is a very valuable player to this New York Giants defense. A lot of it's going to come down to how our new defensive coordinator values him and how he feels how important he would be to this defense. And we'll see ultimately, as free agency comes around, what the New York Giants value him at. Do I think the New York Giants will give him an offer? Yeah, I'm sure they will. Joe Schoen showed you last year that he values bringing players back that he's familiar with, guys that he knows from within the building. He has said that countless times. Just last year, he extended Dexter Lawrence. He extended Andrew Thomas. He extended Daniel Jones. He tagged Saquon Barkley, and he extended Darius Slayton. Those are 5 homegrown guys. You didn't see that too much from Dave Gettleman. So I do think Schoen wants to build from within house. But do I think ultimately they'll get a deal done? I am much more doubtful with a guy like Xavier McKinney than I was with a guy like Daniel Jones last year, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, which were slam dunks, those two. I'm much more doubtful in this situation, and we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. A lot of fans are going to be bummed out if we miss out on bringing him back with the Giants because, yes, we don't have a lot of great players. I wouldn't consider him a great player, but he's at least a guy that's trending that way and is at least a very good player. We also what happened with Landon Collins when he let him go to Washington, and he signed a record-breaking deal. But let's see what I think the market will be for McKinney, or at least what his agent will be driving towards. And you tell me at the end of this video in the comments below where you stand on the McKinney situation. Would you be willing to sign that deal? First, let's talk about the possibility of a tag, because that's something that you have to bring up, right? A franchise tag. We could always tag him. Well, at the bottom of that list, that's what the projected tag price is for the safety position. Last year in 2023, it was 14.46. This year, it's 16.25. And we lived through this last year as Giants fans. We know what that means. You cannot move that money around. If you were to sign Xavier Mckinney to a 4-year deal, $17 million a year on average, which I think is the ballpark figure of what you could expect. And I'll talk more about that throughout the video. We all know you can do things to move money around. We saw it with the Dexter Lawrence contract, the Andrew Thomas contract. You could always extend McKinney 2 years into the contract when he's still only going to be 26 and keep pushing the money back to try to continue to be able to build your football team. If you tag him, even if they were able to create $50 million after draft expenses like I talked about like a month ago, when I did my salary cap video, and now I've seen a lot of other people say the same thing. I saw Duggan say it like a week ago, whatever it may be. And I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to backload some of these salaries. But if you were to free up, say, $50 million to be able to build this team after the draft in free agency, you would be dedicating nearly 40%, it was 30 to 35% of that just to Xavier McKinney if you can't move that money around. If you sign him to a 4-year deal for $17 million a year, that is a much different situation. You may only have $4 or $5 million against the cap this year as you space that out appropriately. So that's where my head's at. I certainly would not tag him, but that's also good news for Xavier McKinney, because that means if we are not going to tag him for that $16.25 million price tag, he's going to hit the open market, and there's going to be 31 other teams potentially bidding on his services. And I think all the signs point to, especially when you look at last year, is coming out from Duggan last year in January of 2023 when he signed on with his current agent. I think all signs point to, especially when you read through that tweet that McKinney posted today, he's going to look to get every penny he possibly can. So don't expect the New York Giants and McKinney to get a deal done before free agency. He's going to want all teams around the league to be able to drive up the price and get as much as he possibly can. At least that's my thought process right now. This is coming out from Duggan. Xavier McKinney, who is eligible for an extension this offseason, is switching to a super agent who reps some of the top safeties in the league. And these are the highest paid safeties in the NFL right now. Most of these contracts were signed 2 years ago. So expect McKinney to at least strive for these deals. But 2 of these contracts on this list are represented by his agent. Yes, I looked into it. Those players are Derwin James, the highest paid safety in the NFL, and the other one is Jesse Bates, who is the 4th highest paid safety in the NFL. What did they get? Well, Derwin James signed his deal in 2022 in August, so 2 years ago. He ended up getting $19 million a year with $42 million guaranteed. 4 years, $76 million. That, to me, is what his agent is going to strive for. Will he get it? I don't know, but McKinney's 24. He's still ascending. The market has since gone up by, we'll say, 15 to 20%. So I think the floor for McKinney, the absolute floor, you're starting at the tag number, probably above the tag number on a per-year basis. $17 million. I think that's the floor, but I think him and his agent are probably striving for closer to $20 million a year. Maybe you're talking 4 years, 80, 35, 40 guaranteed. I think that's a rough estimate of what I would expect them to try to get. And I think history tells us more often than not, when a young player hits free agency who is talented, who is among one of the 2 or 3 best, according to PFF in their rankings, he is the 4th best safety in this year's free agency class, they usually get paid very high. This was the write-up from PFF when they were talking about the safety class at free agency this year. McKinney's coverage grade as a free safety is 81.4, and in the box is 79.4, are top 10 marks among safeties in 2023. And if you don't think McKinney and his agent are going to bring this to the table, you're kidding yourself. Even if you're not the biggest fan of PFF, they will use that to try to drive up the price in negotiations. And the fact that he's still very young. And there is a big enough sample size of box play despite his general deployment as a deep player. Over the past 3 seasons, McKinney's 7 yards allowed per target in coverage ranks top 25 among safeties, and his 17 combined interceptions and forced fumbles put him in the top 20. While he could make some plays at or near the line of scrimmage, he rarely whiffs on open field tackles. The 24-year-old has missed just 7.8% of his tackle attempts over his career, 11th best among 89 safeties with at least 100 tackles over the past 4 seasons, making him a reliable enough to last last line of the defense. So, again, one of the highest ranked players at his position. He's young. He has a super agent. They're going to try to get a lot of money. And I think what you have to ask yourself as a Giants fan, Is he worth this kind of money? Because I don't think he's worth the tag. No slight on him, but if you're going to tag him and pay him 16.5 or 16.25 this year and not be able to move any of that money around, next year, that's going to be closer to 19, 18 and a half, whatever it may be. It was 14 and change last year. So you're probably talking 18 and a half to $19 million next year. So what are you going to do? You're going to tag him again and not be able to move any of that money around? For me, it's one of two situations if you're Joe Schoen with Xavier Mckinney. Option one, you get him signed to a deal similar to that of which I talked about. I would not go 4 years, $80 million at $20 million a year. I'm just not doing it. As much as I like McKinney, I talked about this on Twitter with several of my followers on Twitter, you can get by with mediocre safety play. You can't get by with mediocre offensive line play. And as bad as the New York Giants offensive line is, if you were asking me as a GM how I would want to build my team, I would put my money towards the line. I'd build in the trenches. I think I could find a reliable safety, not nearly as good as Xavier Mckinney perhaps, but a good enough safety to get by if I could improve my pass rush and be able to improve the offensive line. So that is where I would spend my resources as a general manager. But do I think for the right price, Xavier Mckinney would make sense? Absolutely. He's a guy that is very talented. You could argue this top three probably player on our defense. I mean, obviously you got Dexter Lawrence, and then he's at least in the discussion. Bobby Okereke, Xavier McKinney, Kayvon Thibodeau. We'll see, how he develops as his career progresses. But he's certainly one of the better players on this defense, and he could do a lot of things. And like I said at the top of the video, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how our defensive coordinator values him in his scheme. But would I go 4 years, $80 million? No. If I was Schoen, for me at least, I think my tipping point is anything above $17 million a year. 4 years, $17 million a year. I think that's where I'd probably draw the line. Now, will Schoen draw the line there? I don't know. But I think 4 years, 68 with maybe 30 to 35 guaranteed where I could space out the money is doable. I'm still not in love with it, but I do love McKinney. And I do think he's a very important player to this defense. And that way you could space the money out, like I talked about throughout the video. As we all know, we went through this last year with Barkley and Daniel Jones. That's where I stand. 4 years, 68, around $17 million a year. That's where I'd be okay with it as a fan. If they go and approach that $19, $20 million range, when you look at all the other holes on this roster, listen, if you haven't learned your lesson as a fan at the safety spot, Jamal Adams, where did that get the Jets? Where did that get the Seahawks when they traded for him? He's a fantastic player. But to me, with all the holes on the offensive line, the potential quarterback position change in the near future, the Giants have got to invest in this offense. Get this offensive line up to snuff. Invest in that pass rush. That's where I think it's won and lost in the NFL, up at the point of attack. And I'll never change my opinion on that. Much as I love McKinney, as much as I want him back, for what I think he's going to strive for, I wouldn't give him that price. Now, if he goes out there and maybe the safety market isn't as strong as I think it's going to be, and it's possible. Like if you would have told me last year the wide receiver market was going to crater the way in which it did, I would have said I don't agree. I didn't think that would happen. Even though there weren't any upper echelon wide receivers, I thought a team would overpay for one of them, one or two of them, where they would get $17, $18 million a year. That didn't happen. Teams stood strong. They only gave them $12, $13 million. If the safety market isn't there and these guys aren't getting $18, $19, $20 million a year, and you could bring McKinney back at $15 million a year, 4 years, 60, 4 years, 64, I'm for that. I'm good with that. But if he's going to get close to 76, 80 over 4 years with 45 to 50 guaranteed, I think I draw the line there if I'm Joe Schoen and I take my third-round comp pick in future drafts. That's where I stand with it. But it's a very tough decision for Mr. Schoen in a year where the pressure is absolutely going to be turned up. Giants can't go out there and win 6 games this year. 5, 6 games. They can't. All of a sudden, Joe Schoen's going to be on the chopping block. I don't think he'll be fired after this year no matter what. Dable could be. But he will be under immense pressure entering year 4 if this team goes out there and bombs this year. So it's going to be a really tough decision for Joe Schoen. If he does, in fact, let Xavier McKinney go, how does he replace him in this defense? And I think the approach you need to take there is you got to get better up at the point of attack. You got to get a complementary piece to Kayvon Thibodeau on the other side of that defensive line to improve your pass rush, which ultimately you would think and hope would improve what would be you at least assumed to be a mediocre secondary if you were to lose Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson. We'll have to wait and see how the rest of the offseason plays out. Of course, they could always replace McKinney with a more moderate safety in free agency or potentially draft one early day two. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.